do not necessarily reflect or represent those of the owners, management, or advertisers of Pacific Telestations, Inc. This message has been brought to you by the stations of KUAM.
You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to the Buzz, this evening's edition. Actually, we're continuing our conversation with concerns about what's happening with the Archdiocese and, again, the Catholic Church here in Guam. Tonight, we're going to concentrate on the National Museum of the Doce Nombre de Maria Basilica Museum that we heard open and close. We have former volunteers Vanji Luan. Vanji, good evening.
Good evening, Jesse.
And also James Santos, a volunteer as well. You have been, Vanji, you've been very vocal about the situation. You've been there from the get-go. You've recruited James to come in and help you, and he brought along, my understanding is you work for a large corporation out here in Guam as well, right? And
yes.
You brought them along, and they helped contribute a lot of in-kind fixtures, I guess, for the museum, right? Yeah.
Display cases, mannequins, rugs, a lot of donations we put into the museum.
Yeah. So Vanji, the genesis.
Yes. Before we go, I want to also thank so much James himself and his staff. I mean, I think what really he brought was a vision to make it really, truly a world-class place where the museum can grow and can be a showcase for Guam. It's really his talent that he really shared with all of us, with all the people of Guam. And so he's been out with us since the beginning. As I had mentioned in several other stories, when Monsignor James first invited me to participate on the project, I had contacted Joanne Camacho, the First Lady, who was already at DFS, to see if she can give us some showcases. And she had recommended to talk to James about it. And when he first got there, he said that he's willing to help, but not at that time. This must have been like the end of 2013. And then after the first opening, which was March, which was a fundraiser, I called him back and said, please come and see what we did. And he said, oh gosh, what did you tell us, James?
What I can do with this place?
No, not really that. I really saw room for improvement, and I saw room to really set the displays in a way where it could be very cohesive and tell a story.
Are you a merchandiser?
I am a senior manager for visual merchandising at DFS.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to work for a company who supports corporate social responsibility. We give back to our community in many different ways. And this is one project for me that was very close, near and dear to my heart. So when I first met with Vanji and with Monsignor James regarding the museum, I'd taken a walk through the museum, and I looked around and I saw a lot of opportunity of, like I said, how we could make the displays more elevated and present them in a much better way, because the content that was in the museum is phenomenal. It really blew my mind, the type of artifacts that the Archdiocese of Guam owns. I was in shock, actually, to be very honest. I mean, the amount of history and relics that I didn't even know was on this island was amazing. And so when I met with Monsignor James and Vanji, we walked around the space and we discussed, I asked Monsignor James what was the vision for the museum. And he shared with me his vision. And I talked to Vanji, and we had discussed different plans that they were already starting to develop for the museum. And we came together and put together a whole layout and a space plan for the museum to tell the story. The story of the Church of Guam, the Catholic Church in Guam. So this museum was a testament to that history, the long history of the Catholic Church in Guam.
And Vanji, if I'm not mistaken, you worked with a couple of the agencies or entities that you were getting ready again to get grants and things of that nature to help subsidize again what is needed and maybe even grow.
When I first was part of this project, I had enlisted my friends, and I just so happened to work at the coastal management program at the time, and Tom Kanata, who used to run Isla Gallery,
I know Tom
was
very
also
well.
there. And so he said he'll help volunteer to at least do some inventory and to help with the museum. He was very committed to that. Monica Guzman and Cliff Guzman are also my friends, and they brought in, they said they'll be so excited. They also know Monsignor James, and we're very excited to be part of the project. Peter Onidera was going to do all of the translations for us. And so for the March opening, all the text was also in Chamorro, because we wanted to make sure that the Mononco could truly be represented.
So you assembled quite a team.
Kaha was also part of it.
Yeah.
Joe Kanata from Historic Preservation Trust,
sure.
and all of his staff were also part of that team.
yeah.
So it was a big collaboration
Sure,
with so many
sure.
people, so many parties. So that and plus all of the staff from the Catholic cemeteries, the the archdiocese,
sure.
and also with the cathedral itself and Monsignor and all of his staff.
You know, and I'm just thinking back, of course, when you look at the vision of what Hagåtña, you know, the inception of what's going to be now the museum that's going up and things like that. Imagine having history of the church, the Guam history, and things like that, and the walkways and things. And
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, wow, it gives me goosebumps when I think about it.
I think it was all part of the plan
Sure.
to have that incorporated as a complete tour of the restoration of Hagåtña and the redevelopment of
Sure,
Hagåtña.
okay.
And so we had started to also talk to businesses to have their sort of marketing the museum as part of their business in Hagåtña, because it really was a walking historic tour of Hagåtña. The museum, the big windows faced directly into the Plaza de España, because that was a critical history, part of our history.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to incorporate the outside into the inside. And that was something that James brought to our attention, that you have a wonderful space that the museum shouldn't just stop at these walls, but extend out to the rest of Hagåtña.
Yeah, so James, so she recruited you, she paid you $3.95. You know,
It's truly a labor of love.
Truly free.
Truly labor of love.
Yeah. So in doing that, you put your magic together. You helped them. You got the vision. You talked to the Monsignor. Where do you want this to go? What do you want to do? And they said, can you do this? Can you tell the story through what you do? And so you attempted to do that, right?
Yeah, I think we suckucted
Succeeded doing
actually
it,
in putting it all together.
Okay.
You know.
And then so here we are. Here we are today. KUM interviewed you. I think it was a couple of weeks back. Some now the artifacts.
Yes.
I mean, they're not in climate controlled situations here, and things are. You know, some of these things are centuries old,
Yes.
and they get brittle. And we know. I mean, even newspaper, we keep it. In a couple of days, they start to turn yellow. And so I can imagine what some of these things are going through if they're not well kept. So your concern is that these things will deteriorate, and some of the people, again, who have donated have taken their stuff back, but for the ones that stay there that belongs to the archdiocese.
About probably 80% of the museum are things that belong to the archdiocese. Within the museum itself is, of course, Salvatore's cassock. There, the Pope's vestments are there. Those are now relics.
Pope Paul, I mean, yeah.
Pope John Paul.
John Paul, yeah,
His,
sure.
his
yeah.
entire setup of his altar is all there. The history of how the cathedral was built is all there. The pictorial of Saint Therese, her visit here to Guam, is all part of that.
I want to add to as well to that what's in there, the only known Chamorro Bible left on Guam is in the museum.
Wow.
The relics from Father Duenas,
Yes.
his glasses, some of his hair, some of the robe.
Wow.
The crucifix that was discovered when they exhumed his body and moved him out to Inarajan.
Wow.
It's all of that content is in there.
Wow.
So I mean, some rich history, and our main concern is that those relics, that's all we have left.
Yeah.
When those dwindle and disappear, they're gone forever. And so truly, they'll disappear. The people of Guam are the big victims here, because they suffer not being able to see the history of Guam.
Yeah.
And our future generations will suffer from this as well.
So here, let's move to where we're at this point, because I mean it's fantastic, but unfortunately these nice things that and the team that you assemble, I hope they're still together at some point, hoping that they can reassemble and come together again. But so where are we at this point? Because the doors have been closed. I hear there's a chain on the door at this point, and I read the letter you sent out, and I had some people who have come to me and they said that the bishop in his island-wide tour in the different parishes he's visiting, that when asked about the closure of the museum, he stands up and says that Monsignor James was the one that closed down the museum. My understanding was that when he was removed from the basilica, that Monsignor David now had authority, and he was the one that dictates whether they open, close, and whatever.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
We had always planned, and it was announced in church several weeks before August 3rd, which was the opening and closing, I would say, of the museum, where the public had a chance to come and see the valuable assets and artifacts of the church. And so prior to that, there had been many announcements in church that, and in the bulletin, that the museum will be open. And on that specific day, actually August 3rd was really for the parishioners of Agana, because Monsignor James really wanted to share that first with the people of Agana. And it was there in their parish. That is really a parish effort, right? And so on that day, I came there, and it said that it will be temporarily, it was in the bulletin that it would be temporarily closed until the new administration comes in. And so then it was kind of curious, which makes sense, and that parts of it will be dismantled because people were taking their things. During the week that after the announcement of Monsignor James, during that week I had received calls from people asking what's going to happen with the things that they donated for the exhibit. Because the idea was that this was not going to be a stagnant exhibit. We had already plans. We have a plan for December that features all the Belen, people coming in and making Belens for Guam for the Christmas season. We had a schedule already of multiple things where we engaged the parish, where the parish and the school kids can be highlighted, including women of the church, because right now that's not in our first story. And you know, I'm a product of the Mercy Nuns and the Notre Dame Nuns. We have to give them tribute. And so we never got a chance to do that. And so, but that was already on the schedule. We had a plan for that. When we were told that during that week, if I had called down, I'm sorry, excuse me. When I'd called down to the Agana Cathedral and I said, what's going to happen on Sunday? Because we already made the announcement. They said, from Monday till Thursday, they said, we don't know. We haven't heard anything. We'll let Monsignor David know that you're asking about it, but we won't know. I waited 5 days until Friday. I called up and I said, so I'm prepared to come and man the place for that day since it was already announced. But if he doesn't want me to do it, let me know, because then I won't have to come. But then I received a call back late Friday afternoon, and they told me, yes, we're planning for the opening on the 3rd, which was a Sunday. And so we proceeded as normal. When we got there, and then I read that, you know, because the new administration hasn't made a decision, or that, you know, it will be closed after today, the regular hours won't be announced until the new administration takes over. It didn't concern me, because that's what, because they had not communicated with me anything different. When I got, then it was surprising to me the next day to hear that they didn't know about it or any of that kind of stuff. And so my letter really to the Archbishop was to clarify and to clear the air that week Monsignor David was already the rector. I'm not quite sure why he is not taking, or why he's saying that Monsignor James closed the museum. When
after he'd been removed already.
He was already removed.
And he made it clear that Monsignor David was in charge. You know,
I got my orders to open the museum for that day from Monsignor David.
Okay, so you took the orders from there. So I mean,
and we proceeded.
And that those orders at the time, I guess who was in charge hasn't been relinquished that you know of.
So we're 5 months into it, and to continue to say that Monsignor James somehow is associated with closure seems somewhat unfair. It's
disingenuous.
Well, it's sort of not
accurate.
Not accurate. Okay, I tell you what, I got to take a quick break. Got to pay some bills, and we'll come back. We'll talk more about the museum. Be right back.